In progress.
All right. So my name is Dewey. I've been a Linux admin for pretty much since high school. For those who have done a Google search prior to coming here, Automated Bits is kind of the title's a bit misleading. Automated Bits was my vague attempt of a social platform prior to being found out, but I'll definitely go over that story. Again, Daniel Dewey, I actually have a degree in game and simulation programming from DeVry. DeVry. DeVry is a kidney care people. No relation whatsoever, just for some reason the wires crossed. I've been a Linux system and engineer at Ornell for the last 3 years, and I'm still there. I'm also a very amateur astrophotographer. That is actually a picture I've taken of the Orion Nebula with my own equipment. That is about 30-second long exposures stacked all together in order to get that much data out of it. It takes a while. So story time. So nothing to show here. So back when worked for Raytheon, I was a contractor with Raytheon, working on, and I'm allowed to say this, working on their next generation GPS control platform. Mainly on their DevOps side, just getting the software gathered together, automated out, and build up what would become the GPS control platform. During that time, I was pretty much just like, I want to start learning machine learning, AI, just something to keep my skills up to par, because just writing Chef is not necessarily all I want to do. I want to be programming and keeping on the more dev heavy side of things. To that end, I went looking around and being a bit of a Scrooge and looking at all the cloud platforms, AWS, Google, so on and so forth, and just like, I don't want to pay this. Not to say that they're not a good deal for small spurts and just getting work done. They have their use cases. Mine was more of, I want my own infrastructure, and I want it to be up for long periods of time without it hitting my wallet every month. Now, granted, the concession is that it's still going to hit my wallet through my electric bill, but it's at my own discretion. So with that, I set out to actually build out my own cloud platform that I had in the basement. In doing so, as I was developing and looking around and putting the pieces together, I opted to start broadcasting that I'm doing this. Just hey guys, here's what I'm putting this together. Here's my thought process. I'm coding and figuring things out as I go along, letting people know. And I did that in a multitude of fashions. One was through Twitch, live streaming. And a lot of times, like, well, Twitch is for gaming, right? Well, it's just for live streaming. They've just centralized on gaming because that's kind of their core audience. And what I had seen was there was a lot of people just programming games. They would actually, like, they'd have Unity up, they'd have Unreal Engine up, and they're coding and designing and modeling and doing all this stuff just right there. Did they have a large audience? Absolutely not, especially compared to the big gamer people out there. So I figured, just put it out there, and I would live stream myself every Tuesday and Thursday for a couple hours, and I broadcasted it both to YouTube and for Twitch at the same time, although I think their terms of service is actually, please don't do that. But the idea was, I need to get, I'm a small fry, they don't care about me. So one day, head into work, I was locked up in the classified sector, and come out for lunch, check my phone, and I have a message. I have a DM on Twitch. It's like, hey, are you interested in a job? And at first I was kind of like, well, what is this? So this is a little, coming through Twitch, it was, just odd for me. I wasn't expecting it. But I said, wouldn't hurt. Let's just Sure, I'm, not actively looking, but I'm not going to say no. So it's like, what do you got? After a lot of discussion and talking, which was done by Chris Layton over here, he was the one that found me on Twitch, reached out, we talked, went through the whole process of going through Organelle, and actually got really close. Organelle got very close to missing their window on me. But pulled the trigger and here I am. So the main thing I'm going to cover is more so, like, I want to make it clear that what I did is not necessarily going to work for all of you, any of you, but that's not necessarily the point to follow what I did. The point is, what did I do to increase the chances for this to happen? And that's ultimately what it is. So backing up a sec. So again, wanted an API platform, didn't want to pay for AWS. Why cloud? Why not containers? And at the end of the day is containers were new to me and I wasn't quite ready to dive right into that. I kind of just wanted a platform that I could use right off the bat. And VMs are easy in retrospect. I've been dealing with VMs since the beginning of my career, VMware, vSphere, and so on. vSphere costs money, a lot of money. So I had actually went looking around and said, okay, there's open source stuff. Open source is almost, not entirely, inherently free. And it's just going to be a thing in my basement. So I went looking around and I settled on Openstack. And the nice thing about Openstack was it was giving me a bunch of services that I could stand up, just API driven, and that's kind of the point is, I don't, once the stuff is up, I don't want to touch it. It's there. So as long as nothing just blows up, just forget about it, aside from the electric bill. So the nice thing is also it lets me provision bare metal. So if I add another node, just, oh, hey, couple button presses and, off to the races, I've scaled up. And at the end of the day, everything is an API. That's the main thing is everything should be an API so that you can code all the things, which kept me in line of, I'm still developing for stuff. It's not necessarily machine learning, but that kind of comes after I've got the infrastructure of. So this is actually, I dubbed my cloud fog because it's a cloud that's in the basement. So this is actually in my parents' basement. I was living with my parents at the time, and I bought myself 4 HP ProLiant machines off of Newegg. They actually came with i3 processors, but because the socket is the same, I was able to grab some relatively cheap Xeons and throw them in there, upgrade the RAM, and I got some pretty decent horsepower for $200. On the far left, down on the floor there are 2 UPSs. Those are still live. In fact, my desk is running off of that one of them. Yeah, they're still running. They're still going pretty strong. Up above is the monitor, just some old Dell monitor, 1024 by 768. That's the resolution. That is how old that monitor is. But it works because it's VGA. You can see behind the monitor, there's actually 4 Cisco small business switches. Those are mainly, they were cheap, they were manageable, meaning I could set up VLANs and help keep the network all segmented. Another thing that's back there is a Ubiquiti Edge Router X. So I had NATed my entire infrastructure. So I was a NAT inside my parents' NAT. So they can get, you can get in, but it was still segmented off, and we hadn't really, my parents didn't have the infrastructure to add another subnet. So we just kind of hid my infrastructure just behind a single lone solitary IP. The box with the blue light to the left of the monitor is my NAS. That is my storage, or was my storage. That is a Silverstone case with an ITX motherboard, an Intel Atom processor. It was running FreeNAS, had 8 drives in it, and would do I would do iSCSI from it down to nodes just for backend storage, mainly Cinder and Glance, and because there was like 1 SSD in each of those boxes. They're not hosting anything big. So these used to be on the floor, and then my mom decided, no, you're not putting this on the floor. Here's a rack. So, so I had to get it all up off the floor. Let's see. So the main thing that honestly, if you take nothing else away from this is the one thing to take away, which is just get your name out there. And it doesn't have to be fancy, it just needs to be out there. Especially, whether or not you're looking or not, just having some trail to your name somewhere that, easy business card of like, hey, just visit this website. In the screenshots, I've got my Twitch page on the left, a countdown that's still running and very inaccurate because I haven't live streamed in 3 years. There's my YouTube page, which is literally just an archive of everything I was streaming. So because I was live streaming on YouTube as well, I set it up so that it just auto posted whatever I just streamed. So in effect, whatever was on Twitch was also on YouTube. And it helps serve as an archive so that anyone can look it up and do, pick up, try to follow along or just kind of understand what I'm trying to go for. And then I have my blog at the bottom center, a very poorly made WordPress site. The main idea was, at the very least, even if no opportunity came out of it, I was helping to foster a discussion about, am I doing the right thing? Here's an idea, or here's a problem I'm running into. I'm thinking X, Y, Z. Is there any feedback on that? And ultimately, I got a little bit of that. There was one person, I think he was based in Europe, and he just kind of tuned in and asked a few questions and then just kind of disappeared, which was fine. It was just, hey, you had a question, I was able to answer it. It's really what I'm going for. So yeah, just fostering a classroom effectively. Pretty much it's just making your own opportunities. And I'll just read it. The best opportunities are the ones you aren't looking for, but the ones that found you because you made it easy to be found. And that's kind of what I'm attributing to part of my success and part of the message I give out when I say, hey, this is what I did, is just I made the opportunity. I didn't realize it at the time, but I made it for myself. I put it out there and try to serve it as a lesson of like, something as benign as, hey, I'm writing a simple hello, a complicated hello or simple hello world program. But you're putting it out there, you're eliciting feedback, whether it's through Reddit, Facebook, doesn't matter. Just try to interject, try to become either part of an existing community just enough to be able to get people to start looking. So kind of where's Fog right now? Well, Fog is going through a massive restructure. I'm still trying to follow the same tenet of what I'm going out for, which is API-driven infrastructure, my own private cloud. But it's definitely grown in scale, and I've only ever had, not to any detriment of Openstack, it's just more of my inability to focus properly on my home projects. Openstack has only been running in my house for like 3 months. And then I tear it down and try doing something else. Which for a home lab is kind of the point, is you give yourself an environment to be able to try new things, to break it, fix it, or be able to try it again. Essentially what I'm doing right now is I am trying to write as much of the Ansible as possible outside of OpenStack's Ansible itself. Been there, done that, someone else did it better, I'm gonna leverage that. But when it comes to smaller things like an NFS server, an NTP server, or maybe just automation to go and kick off a few containers here and there. That's the stuff that I don't need to borrow someone else. I can do it myself and turn it into a learning opportunity where it's like, okay, what are my standards? How am I going to document this? How am I going to go about this? And then take that and compare it to what everyone else did. Did you like your way better? Did you like their way better? What about their way was actually maybe more efficient than yours, or maybe you found a way of like, kind of like mine better because either it's circumstantial in for your particular case, or maybe theirs was circumstantial, only worked for them. It wasn't good, and it wasn't really in prime position for the overall picture of like, drag and drop and run the code. One such example was, if you're familiar with Ansible, you'll probably know the guy named as Jeff Geerling. He writes a lot of Ansible books. He actually has his own YouTube where he automates everything in Ansible. And he had it was an NFS role, and I was running into a problem where I needed a little bit finer granularity than he needed. So, I wish I could remember the specifics on it, but what I ended up doing was I just forked it. He lightly touches a few things here and there, and again, it's more specific for him, but I was able to grab the greater code base, pull it local, and then just add my spin to it. And I really wish I could remember the specifics on why I forked it in the first place. I do remember it was something I'm like, I'm surprised you're not running into this, but for your home, probably fine. I think it had to do with some security bits. Mainly, one thing that I'm doing is I stand up my own free IPA server, which is effectively open source Active Directory, for lack of a better short description for it. It adds Kerberos on top of that, and you need to make sure you're setting appropriate flags, otherwise NFS will not let you connect. So I needed to add some additional flags. Could I grab a wrapper? Sure. But ultimately, I just wanted like, this is NFS. Just let it put the control there. So some of the lessons I'm having to relearn again is, especially now 3 years later, is setting aside time to focus on what, your own personal project. I'm doing a lot of running around for, between work and trying to get a lot more fit and active. But also, I want to keep the home project going on. I do still want to get that main infrastructure up so I can actually, spin up OpenShift, spin up, which is, for lack of, again, short description, Red Hat Enterprise Kubernetes, if you haven't heard of it. And then, eventually home automation, go and shove Home Assistant up in there and start automating my very small apartment. But mainly taking time, sitting down, taking the time and figure out like, okay, I've got some time. Could I watch TV maybe, or could I maybe spend an hour or two before going to bed and, just coding away. Or just trying to figure out like, okay, what are my next steps? It's taking time to figure out what you want to do next. It's a very valid time. It's not always going to feel like it, but it helps make sure that the time you spend afterwards is more focused, more of what you want to be doing, rather than at the end of the day going after and like, I could have spent that better. So below is the graphic below, it's a little hard to read, is pretty much the infrastructure that it has grown into. I now have, and I'll have an actual picture of my rack just after this, but pretty much I've got, I'm going for high availability. So I'm actually doing the full, 3 controller nodes, so that if any one dies, I got the other 2 to pick up. I've got multiple machines in order to, launch my programs off of. I even have a Mac Mini in there somewhere that's it's running CentOS with running as one of the primary free IPAs for the entire structure. And that storage box, it's still there. It's not doing anything at the moment, but it will be acting as a backup for the big storage I put in there. So it's all there. It's just expanded a lot more beyond the scope of just OpenStack. It's effectively turning into my own standalone enterprise where I've got disk encryption. I have single sign-on. capabilities. I've got backups. I got a container, virtual, and a cloud platform all in there. So that's kind of, I pulled that out of my documentation. So that's the other thing is whatever you do, document it. Even if it's just for yourself, document. So that is what that is what Fog is currently.
It looks a lot better.
It's grown. So you'll see the original 4 on the left rack. You've got the original 4 ProLiants. You've got the NAS box. The Mac Mini is there, or has been added there. Though I've actually have since retired the Mac Mini because it just refused to boot. Let's see. On the right, I've actually got. I haven't quite figured out what I'm doing with those laptops. They're old, and there are a few, like for example, Overt, which is effectively Red Hat VMware, is really wants all the hardware to be the same. And I can guarantee you those are not all the same. One of them is Celeron. Yeah. So I'm scrap that very quickly. I'm thinking it can run like maybe 1 container, if I feel frisky.
It's probably not worth the electricity.
It's probably not, honestly. Yeah.
I got a guy that paid cash for it. Scrap. Literally.
I'm not surprised by that. So you'll see in the back of the rack now. Well, first let me address the problem that I'm sure someone's yelling at me for. I know one person already has prior to here. Is the sitting on top of the rack systems. You'll see a unified puck for Wi-Fi. I know it's an inherent Faraday cage. I'm in a 1,200 square foot apartment. It don't matter. Actually, and it's been sitting there for the last 3 years and I've never had a problem. So I've been pretty happy with it. I am moving away from Unify because Ubiquity has annoyed me in various sense of the word. In the back, you'll see hanging off the back to the just below the laptops, a white box. That is a 10 gigabit MikroTik switch. It is 20 ports, and I do have ConnectX 2s in every single box with dual port. So they can fail over at the individual port level. Now, if the NIC goes, the NIC goes. I'm screwed no matter what. I don't have enough ports to give everyone a second NIC, nor do I have the budget. Let's see. I've also got it set up so that you'll notice that the big bundle of wires up in the front, I have opted to, I like blinky lights, and I'm sure the rest of us are as well. I took this to the extreme. My edge router and edge switch, not Unified, the actual edge series of Ubiquity's lineup. I have them stored in the front, and then I have patch panels in the front and in the back with, as I'm sure you can find out, a slew of a mess of wires running from the back to the front. This way, I'm not having to go in the back all that often. Surprisingly enough, I've done, so it was 40 ports. Worked first time. Will never happen again. I actually made every single one of those cables by hand. My hands have still not recovered.
Are those all base T?
I'm sorry?
Are those all base T, twisted pair Ethernet?
The Ethernets are gigabit. The Aqua that you'll see, the Aqua cables that you see in the cable management sticking off the side of the rack there, those are fiber. Fiber you can't make yourself, so yeah, I did. You know, that's not handmade. Let's see.
Fiber kit's not in the budget.
No, just testing is not in the budget. Actually, it's a little hard to see. I do have my UPSs for the home stuff have upgraded, so I've actually got in-rack dual APC UPSs. Down at the very bottom, yeah. Those things are heavy. They are not going any higher. And then above that, I've got a 4U Supermicro node, AMD Opterons, dual AMD Opterons. They're old, they're loud, and I've replaced the fans, and now the power supply is louder than the whole thing. Power supplies are loud. Supermicro does actually come out, have a quiet variant of some of their power supplies. The ones for those are so old that I can only get them to come in from China. I cannot find them coming from anywhere else. So they're gonna be loud for a while. I am looking at potentially upgrading most of these nodes because the above the 4U Supermicro, I've got Supermicro Twins, which are 2U, 2-node chassis running DDR3, and they only have 16 gigabytes each. And trying to run 16 gigabytes on a VM platform is not gonna work. And I've looked into what it would take to upgrade them, and I might as well reallocate the money I would normally spend on DDR3 RAM and just buy new nodes that are more power efficient. One other thing to note that someone else also may be yelling is, well, what about your power and surge suppression? Yeah, I'm actually actively monitoring the amount of wattage and volts and everything coming off of that. Give me a sec, Chris. I've actually moved the that power cable that you see running from the left rack to the right rack. I actually had to move that over to the closet because I was tripping. I was actually tripping the breaker. It is on my master bedroom breaker for some ungodly reason.
It works.
I'm not arguing. It's just very odd. So the UPSs are still on the same circuit, but I am actively monitoring with a service. It's an open source project called Nuts, I believe, and it is talking with the APCs just all the time. I had a whole Grafana graph, just short of actually notifying, but I also put in color code, and it got very close to the yellow. Yellow means 80%. Which you do not want to sustain on these circuits, which are 120 volt AC.
80% is well within NEC code.
I'm sorry?
80% is within NEC code.
Yeah.
You just can't top it for more than 9 days.
Yeah, I can't promise they won't sustain above that.
I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can put a monitor in the box. You mean at the junction box where circuit breakers are? You can put a monitor there and it'll actually monitor like that.
Can you do that without an electrician? Okay. No, I could look at that.
Basically, clamps around the black wire.
Oh, I see. Huh. Okay. So, Chris.
Yeah, I think I have.
What was your hand raise?
Well, I was curious if you had thought about trying to oversubscribe your memory.
So the question here was, sometimes it's hard to hear. Yeah, if you're deliberately trying to oversubscribe your memory.
Yeah, I mean, so I know that you mentioned that RAM's expensive and you're trying to consolidate, that yet VMs are kind of RAM hungry.
Right.
It's something we haven't done in the office. I was just curious if you looked at it, decided not to, or something you had on your radar, and maybe you were going to evaluate, or just something you just didn't want to mess with.
I had thought about it. The concern is that I was wanting to also use these nodes for Ceph, and the load that would come from Ceph, as well as trying to balloon the memory, not to mention the overhead of ballooning memory in general, is just, I could probably get away with it just fine in reality. But I've dealt with ballooning memory just on an enterprise level in previous past lives, and the performance is not worth the gain, in my opinion, even looking at it from a non-HPC perspective.
No, and I mean, I would think like KSM, where you're doing same page duplication.
Right.
If you're running VMs, you're going to have a decent number of pages that are going to be right?
Right.
So I was just curious if you've done any testing and like, ooh, this, KSM was chewing up the whole core and it was causing everything to balloon and it got out of control and crashed. Or if you're just like, I mean, valid answer, Ceph's a valid answer, because that's going to be kind of hard thing to balance, because you can't easily prioritize what gets access to the done.
Right. Well, plus also I'm going to have the problem of Ceph cache, which we have experience with. At the end of the day, I hadn't actually tried it, but Ceph was kind of enough to push me over the edge. It's just like, it's not even worth the attempt. Plus also the amount of power saving I could get by getting newer nodes. I went looking around. eBay is one of your best friends for finding decently priced Dells, actually. So I was looking at a Dell R730, I believe it was. It was bare bones, so I'd have to, provide your own processor, RAM and whatnot, but about $300. Orangecomputers.com. I think I might have actually heard that one. It's been a while though. I'll have to take a look at that.
A lot of gray market equipment from them that would be an R730 or even R740 series.
Okay. Yeah, and I had also thought about checking out some of the government auctions around the area. Just haven't spent the time to do it yet.
Some of our old equipment ever shows up in the ORL surplus auction.
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons I was thinking about that. It's like I've seen what gets what the lab chucks. It's like you can get in on a little bit of that. And my understanding would be a blind pallet though. Yeah. So let's see, I think that's it.
If you want on Knox
Yeah.
slide, you can find the figure vendor by pallet.
Yeah, main thing is like I've got so little. So to give you an idea, my desk, see that little notch coming up from in front of the it's actually a printer rack, and I put my HPs on it. That's my desk. I have not a lot of room, at least in my office, and this is hiding the mess. So
We have a question from home.
okay.
When will he move his blog into his home lab?
That's actually something I had considered, because I am trying to be security conscious and thought about just out of curiosity setting up like a honeypot. First and foremost, it may be a while before I move my blog local. At the very least, my current goal is get the infrastructure up and then serve. I've actually got my parents in Colorado and myself, our routers are VPN together. I actually recently stood up a free IPA secondary over in my parents' place so that they can start leveraging the whole single sign-on and whatnot. So the idea is, get them up to speed and being able to leverage some of the infrastructure I have, mainly for my dad, get them access to Plex, and then eventually look at getting them maybe hosting the site local. I do got to say though, I did get an email from Google recently about their analytics. They're like, "Oh, your site's been hit 1,300 times," and I went and looked. They all came from China, every single one of them. So that's something I'd have to contend with and I would have to do a lot of security investigations before I decide to move that. Not necessarily from reroute the DNS over and, start getting pummeled by whatever that site is currently handling. But mainly just I want to make sure everything's locked down before I open anything that is now publicly available from an open port perspective.
Is your blog publicly listed?
Yes. I think GoDaddy has the domain, and then I can't remember the other provider. They have an Alligator for their symbol.
Can you set up HostGator?
HostGator, yeah. Sorry.
Does the hosting provider allow you to set geofence?
I honestly haven't looked. I have not given my blog the TLC it deserves. I've been thinking about going back to it, but I've put that on hold because my current work is so close to what I would put on that site that I need to get approval. So.
What kind of services are you trying to have your parents use this for?
It would mainly be for my dad. My mom probably wouldn't handle any of it because she runs Mac and all that. But it's mainly, my dad actually runs his own Kubernetes cluster at home. And we have, less for single sign-on and just more for authentication and cert management. Let's see, Nextcloud, eventually that one will be opened up for the brothers to log in. I eventually want to get Plex put behind a proper certificate before I deign to even let the port open on that one. May even switch that one over to Jellyfish. I haven't decided yet. Let's see. There's various graphing services. So I eventually want to get it so that when my dad decides to spin up an instance, whether it's cloud, VM, or container, that it just starts reporting everything to Grafana, so he get assigned into that. I think that one I was thinking Zabbix would be the main hoster, because Prometheus, I'm not a fan of how they handle that. I'm sorry, when you have a service asking to stand up its own web server just to get numbers pushed out rather than pushing to the central server, that's a security problem. Uh-oh.
We have a comment from home. If you move the blog on-prem, move it to a static site generator and put it behind a CDN like Cloudflare. Check out how noted.lol, real site, did it.
Yeah, I have seen actually, Jeff Geerling actually ran into something similar where he, in one of his videos, he sent out a challenge and he regretted it 12 minutes later. And he very quickly got Cloudflare involved and started getting everything routed through them in order to get his site under control.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was running on a Pi. Pi was dead real fast.
Yeah.
Search look at Nginx proxy manager. It is amazing. I guess from what perspective? So I'm assuming that would be for load balancer cert perspective. I was looking at Keycloak for at least the backend authentication for anything that supported SAML and OAuth. As far as anything like a front-end load balancer, OpenStack has Octavia, which I think is just spinning up Nginx instances, if I remember correctly. And then Kubernetes has traffic and as well as a Nginx ingress, if I remember correctly. I'm sure there's an Apache one as well. I haven't looked at the specifics in terms of what I'm going to do for like a load balancer. I haven't really gotten that far yet. But it was definitely on my radar. So.
At risk of destroying even more of your free time, have you heard of DN42?
The question was, have you heard of DN42?
I have not heard of DN42.
It is a community-based VPN-based BGP peering network. It exists entirely to play with BGP. So people run BGP over VPN links, literally peering with each other to get experience and play around with BGP and other things that you just don't get to play with.
It's all good until you advertise the wrong route.
Yeah, and then everyone yells at you on the mailing list.
Someone thought I saw a company in the last 2-3 months or so that had a BGP problem. But
it was probably Verizon. It's always
that's probably Verizon. It seems to be Verizon. What's up?
Got another question from chat. Does your dad do IT professionally then? When did you start getting into computers more than casually?
So my dad was a storage architect for Quantum Corporation, mainly for the DXI line of backup systems that Quantum produces. He is now currently a DevOps manager at Jump Cloud. In terms of when I started getting computers more casually, was kind of more, honestly, high school and university. So I had always toyed with Fedora and Knoppix back in like high school days. And was just kind of just playing around with it every so often, and would even install it on a laptop and bring it in for note taking at school. And then university, I had joined I think it was a Linux appreciation club or something along those lines. And that's when I started actually toying with Gen 2 Linux, and actually ran Gen 2 as my primary for about 5 years. And then eventually the administration was like, this could be easier and I don't want to keep doing this forever.
Another comment there for DNS routing proxy with SSL from Let's Encrypt and super easy interface. If you plan to run entirely K8 traffic or traffic?
It's pronounced traffic, but I think it's spelled like TRAEFIC or something like that. Yeah, so the main reason behind hosting, so FreeIPA does its own cert management. It's part of its whole security Kerberos stuff. And the reason I was going with that was mainly because it would give, like if I wanted to give out a cert to my brother or something, who's, they're not necessarily technical, and at the end of the day, when it's their off time, they just want to be, one and done, get over it. But I also want them to be on the safe side. So what I'm wanting to do by hosting my own cert authority is force them to actually, just take a quick look at the cert. As long as they see my name is in there, that's probably going to be enough, or at least the site that I'm using as a local domain. Just enough to be able to like, okay, yes, I trust that, move on. The other nice thing also with FreeIPA that I've really enjoyed, when you have FreeIPA offer out certificates, it uses, I believe it's dog tag. And one of the nice things that comes with it is when the cert is about to expire, it will auto renew it for you. And so rather than me having to go and, maybe worst case scenario, I restart the service in order to pick up the new cert. Otherwise, I don't have to worry about the cert expiring. It just gets replaced on its own and self-deployed. Versus, I think Let's Encrypt does something similar.
It's the Acme protocol.
The what?
Acme.
Okay.
You have to have a piece of software that manages it. There's tons of them out there now.
Right.
Circle especially.
Okay. Yeah, FreeIPA was also using CertMonger, I think. Might be good.
CertMonger, and then there's also Cert Manager, which is a Linux operator.
Right.
Which speaks Acme and a few other protocols.
Right. So.
I think DogTag comes with a SCEP service.
Yeah, I thought Kubernetes had a FreeIPA manager specifically.
Yeah, I think there's a better.
Yeah. So my main thing with Let's Encrypt is combination of they want port 80 open, which no.
You don't have to.
I know there's workarounds to it, but at the same time, like most of my stuff is really going to be self-hosted, so the outside world will never see it. And I don't want to have to deal with the whole jangle of getting the cert inside and then deployed to the multiple services. Whereas FreeIPA is giving me my authentication, the cert security, as well as the other nice thing is the group and pseudo security. So I can actually define pseudo rules in FreeIPA so that only this user is allowed to run these pseudo commands or all of them on these specific hosts. So they've got auto join, RBAC rules, and HBAC. So just keep it self-contained. And I also don't want to depend on anything external. Part of this kind of a bleed over to my mentality of the smart home approach, which is if my internet is down for whatever reason, and I have AT&T, so dime a dozen, or insert ISP of your choice here. I don't want any part of my infrastructure to be down for whatever reason. Whether it's like for a home automation, it's something as simple as like, okay, now I can't give Google, Google thing, or I can't control my light bulb because it can't reach the server up in AWS. it's a similar mentality where if I can keep it all local, yes, that's more administrative overhead on my side. But for the most part, the services just kind of run themselves. So I don't have to do too much in terms of the administration beyond the initial setup. The only downside is the increased load, just because like, oh, well, you know, Keycloak is probably going to want 4 to 6 gigs of RAM out of my 16 gig. So it's actually not too bad. I've got right now, the Mac Mini was replaced by a Lenovo thin client that I'm currently wrestling with the Intel. What is it? Intel's out of band thing. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah. It's the V Pro, but there's like a AMI or something like that. In order to get their firmware installed, because Lenovo also had their problem with their UEFI firmware had a bug where you could, if the UEFI firmware was infected prior to getting it patched out, as long as it was infected, it couldn't get fixed. The infection would stop, and even upgrading it wouldn't, you know, you couldn't get rid of it that way. So yeah, Lenovo does a lot of stuff, and that's a lot of UEFI firmware to mess up. So anyway. I think that's the same one.
They would only launch Ubuntu entries except for that enterprise Windows.
But I do also actually, one thing that this helped was, I do disk-based encryption with, so when the machines boot up, if I give them about 5 seconds, as long as the network is running fine, there's a Tang server also running on the free IPA that will just auto decrypt. And I even have my desktop auto doing it as well. So
I guess I have to ask the weird question: what are you backing the Tang store with?
Nothing yet. That is on my to-do list of stuff I need to get fixed. I do plan on eventually running Tang H8 between a load balancer, but eventually I do need to get that stuff backed up. My current plan in terms of the backup solution is, so the NAS box in the on the printer rack is going to be a backup destination for one of the copies. I'm trying to follow the 3-2-1 backup terminal or the policy. The other one is I'm going to be making a pretty much I'm going to be making my own storage box to preload it with my stuff here, because I've got 30 terabytes of media and I need that. I want to get that replicated to the box, ship it over to my parents' place, and then just, you know, because we're all in the same network, I can turn it on as needed to do the once a week sync and turn it back off. So that as far as they're aware, it's not there.
Good luck with it.
Oh yeah, it's an endeavor.
I'm sure they'll love the 747 taking off every Friday night.
I just need shipping spindle rods.
Yeah. Well, so the other side of that is to make it so that the well, actually, I do have a box. Dewey got lazy one time and they shipped me hard drives, and a quarter of this box that was made for shipping a whole thing of hard drives. They just, yeah, and they just sent, you know, a quarter of the box was filled. It's like, here's your drives. I'm like, all right, I got storage now. So I've got that I can send to them to help keep honestly the best I can do aside from driving it out there.
Yeah.
So, which I wouldn't be opposed to doing, because that's actually how I got my Orion picture. Was I just loaded up all my telescope equipment in the back and drove across country for the holidays. It was cold that night. Very, very cold.
At risk of taking us onto a tangent, have you found the Smoky Mountain astronomical? Have you found the Smoky Mountain Astronomical Society yet?
I've found it. I just haven't gone to them yet.
Okay.
Currently, my current goal is to get up to Pickett. There's a Pickett camp. I think it's Pickett. There's a campsite up near the border of Tennessee and Kentucky.
Yeah.
And they've actually got a dark sky rating. So it's one of the closest, best sites to actually go for dark sky this side of the Mississippi. So pretty much, you can actually pull up a map of the dark sky light pollution levels, and pretty much as soon as you hit the Mississippi, it just drops. to where, you like, I was driving through Kansas on the way back, and just in the middle of Kansas, I was able to look up, hey, Ryan, with my lights on.
So then comes the question, do you build fog out more, or do you build a dog?
Carry this over to drink.
Yeah.
I gotta, well, right now the infrastructure needs to be fully built. I've got FreeIPA running. I'm still dealing with trying to figure out what I want to do from a virtual machine perspective. Because I was going to run Overt. Overt has been officially dropped as far as Red Hat is concerned with their Red Hat virtualization product. But it's honest, like not a fan of Debian in general, and Proxmox was okay, but Proxmox also doesn't really have any plugins for being managed by anything else.
I've heard good things about XCP&G, but I've never used it myself.
That was another one I was looking at. I can't remember. One thing I was wanting to run was ManageIQ, which is Red Hat CloudForms. And I can't remember if they supported XCP&G. I don't think they did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stuck with Overt as much as I have. So it's one of those where I'm not building my infrastructure fast enough to keep up with the constant change. So I'm still in the middle, like, okay, I can either deploy Overt or I can start looking at the OpenShift virtualization plugin.
I guess there's also Harvester, which is Rancher sticker.
Right.
And the VMs are actually just Kubernetes manifests. So VMs being launched. Yeah,
I know there's another YouTuber called TechnoTim. He runs a lot of the Rancher stuff. He's got some pretty decent content. In terms of decent YouTubers, tech YouTubers to look at, there's, Linus Tech Tips is good for the consumer side. They do have the occasional enterprise side, but their facts can be off.
Terrible.
Just don't subscribe. I mean, it's mainly oh, hey, that's cool. I probably would never like their $1 million storage project. I had heard about at the lab, but probably never would have seen because it's above my clearance. What was another one? TechnoTim. Jay's 2 cents is good from a consumer side. He doesn't touch on the enterprise side. TechnoTim's really Jeff Geerling, of course. Jeff Geerling actually does a whole slew of things. He does especially Pi-centric. Serve the Home is another one. Serve the Home has some good stuff, especially from a home lab perspective. I think a couple months ago, Supermicro actually brought him out to give a look over at some of their current line of products. Nothing really stuck out to me that I hadn't already heard behind an NDA, but that's about as much as I can say on that. But yeah, there's some pretty decent service stuff, pretty decent resources out there, both YouTube and just blogs. I know Jeff Geerling also he runs his own blog off of Pi, which got hit a lot. Cloudflare for the win.
Have you looked at the Turing Pi 2?
I have not. Actually, I don't think I've heard of it. Actually, I heard that in name. I don't think I never actually looked into it. I know one other thing that my dad was looking at because the Pis were starting to disappear at the beginning of the pandemic was they have decided to start naming everything of that small form factor after fruit. So now there's Banana Pi. There's also some if you're fine with straight up ARM processors, which has its own overhead, is still hopefully like the container you're looking for actually supports ARM and not just built only on x86. Then by all means, there's a lot of ARM-based small form factor PCs. Was it Oracle? I think it was Oracle had the largest Pi cluster where they literally just took an entire rack and installed a bunch of Raspberry Pis and had them all interconnected as a single cluster. I can't remember what they were doing it for, what it did, aside from just light computing. DeVry.com. Yeah, I'll take a look at that later.
Yeah.
So.
Other,
Of the things you built in your home lab, which of them gives you the most joy?
The most joy? It's honestly a little hard.
the question is, of the things that you've built in your home lab, which of them gives you the most joy? Just for the people know.
Is it the one that reduced your power bill the most?
I'd rather not discuss the power bill.
And the most heartache was what Caleb sort of chimed in on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say the most joy was honestly the metric side of things. So getting Zabbix going, main reason I did Zabbix rather than like Influx was just because Influx doesn't support HA without you paying them an arm and a leg and half your soul. The Zabbix was kind of nice getting stood up and adding custom scripts in order to, plugging into the NUT server in order to start showing all the data. In terms of the most heartache, honestly, in some parts, free IPA is kind of a continuous. That's mainly just honestly, free IPA's main thing is just my lack of knowledge on that, which is kind of the point. Like I recently ran into a problem where they run their own bind server and they were not responding to anything. I would just be doing constant digs and it would just be coming up no answer, no answer, no answer. The head slap moment was I figured this out once before and had promptly forgotten and didn't document. That was my bad. I knew better. I went to stand up for APA to have as a replica out at my parents' place and was running it the same thing. It's not answering. And it turns out there's they don't document this either. There's a bind config file that you need to add ACLs for to allow your network to be responded to. And as soon as I put that in and reset free IPA, everything lit up. So it's always the smallest things that will be the biggest catches. Does the server spark joy? I've seen Marianne Kondo. It's there that Celeron is probably quick on the list.
It does not spark joy.
It is not spark joy. Actually, those Intel Supermicro twins are quickly being on that list. Combination of the RAM, but they're loud. It's bad enough I've got the discs, and the bottom one is, even though it's 4U, it's got like these small, that one was a little bit of fun. So I actually customized the fans inside of the bottom Supermicro. It is old enough that IPMI, it's pre-IPMI 2.0, so I can't even give it raw fan commands. So when it gets loud, I can do nothing about it. I can't even tell it to go to a lower profile. And Linux can't see them. So what I ended up doing was I took out the sled. So there's 9 fans, and replaced them all with Noctua fans. But I wanted to keep the sleds themselves because they're just handy. So I got myself, actually got a Dremel tool for the holidays, and I used that to actually cut little pieces into the little holes in the sled in order to get the fan to fit. And then was able to, then even smaller notches for the fan plug to fit as well into what the carrier had. Put that in there and then got it all up, and it was great for the first couple hours, and about 5 hours in, the PSU decided to get noisy and wouldn't come down either. So
what are you using for site-to-site connectivity at this point?
Currently, site-to-site between my parents' place and myself is leveraging the edge router. Can't remember the official term for it, but it's effectively OpenVPN on the back end. Edge router, Ubiquiti runs their own OpenVPN instance. And I've got the two just talking to each other with a private key. So.
Cool. All right. This was giving me the watch All right, so I think it's time to adjourn. Everybody, let's give a round of applause to Daniel. Thank you so much. And your tab is on us at Knox Brew Hub.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the incentive for speakers, right? So anyway, once again, thank you very much. We're going to be meeting, I guess, first Tuesday next month, July 5th, right? And Mr. Wesley Kirkland is going to be sharing his experience, strength, and hope with
Terraform.
Terraform. That's right.
Ooh.
So
This Terraform media is right presentation.